A diver clutches the bent bars of a cage as a massive orca slams into it, tearing steel apart. Blood clouds the water as chaos erupts beneath the surface. The crew above struggles to save the divers while the predator circles, striking again and again. This is just one of 6 terrifying attacks where humans come face to face with the ocean's deadliest hunters. Watch as survival hangs by a thread in these gripping shark and predator encounters that push fear to its limits. On the morning of December 28, 2024, Sarah Bell, a 30-year-old marine enthusiast from Bristol, England, arrived at a marina near Gansby, South Africa. This small coastal town was famous for its great white sharks, drawing thrill seekers and researchers from all over the world. Sarah, a scuba diver with years of experience, had saved for months to afford this once-in-a-lifetime cage diving expedition. The day began early with the sun just starting to light the horizon as Sarah joined a group of tourists on the boat, Ocean Guardian. The crew welcomed everyone with a safety briefing, explaining how the cage dive would work and what to do in an emergency. Sarah listened intently, her excitement tempered by the nerves she always felt before entering the open ocean. Gansby's waters are part of a rich marine ecosystem where seals, dolphins, and fish thrive, making it a hotspot for great white sharks. While cage diving with sharks is an incredible way to observe these apex predators up close, it also carries risks. The cage, built to withstand encounters with great whites, was made of thick steel bars designed to keep divers safe from curious or aggressive animals. By 9 a.m., the boat reached Shark Alley, a channel between Dyer Island and Geyser Rock. The crew began chumming the water with fish oil and bait to attract sharks. Sarah suited up in a wetsuit, adjusted her mask, and climbed into the cage along with 2 other divers. The cage was lowered into the water, hanging just below the boat, with air hoses allowing the divers to breathe while submerged. The first hour went as planned. Several great whites appeared, circling the cage and snapping at the bait. Sarah marveled at their size and power, feeling a mix of awe and respect. She held on to the bars of the cage, her camera capturing the incredible creatures just inches away. Then, something unexpected happened. A shadow larger than any great white Sarah had ever seen appeared in the distance. As it drew closer, the shape of a massive orca or killer whale became clear. Orcas are rarely seen in this area, but they are among the ocean's most intelligent and powerful predators. Unlike great whites, which rely on ambush tactics, orcas hunt in packs and can take down prey as large as whales. The orca swam just below the cage, its black and white body gliding effortlessly through the water. At first, it seemed uninterested in the divers, focusing instead on the bait lines. Sarah's excitement grew as she watched the orca's sheer size and grace, but the moment quickly turned from thrilling to terrifying. The orca suddenly changed direction, swimming straight toward the cage. With a powerful thrust of its tail, it rammed the structure, sending a shudder through the bars. Sarah and the other divers clung to the cage, the impact nearly knocking them loose. Above, the crew scrambled, shouting instructions and trying to figure out what was happening. Before Sarah could process what was going on, the orca struck again, this time harder. The force bent one of the steel bars inward, creating a narrow gap in the cage. The divers panicked, their movements frantic as they tried to stay out of harm's way. The third strike was devastating. The orca rammed the cage with enough force to knock Sarah backward. Her head hit the metal frame and everything went black. When Sarah regained consciousness, she was underwater, her vision blurry and her ears ringing. The cage was badly damaged, its structure twisted and unstable. One of the other divers had managed to climb out and was being pulled to safety by the crew above. The second diver was nowhere to be seen, and Sarah felt a surge of panic. The orca was still there, circling the cage like a predator sizing up its prey. Sarah's breathing was shallow, her air supply limited by the chaos of the attack. She grabbed onto the bars, trying to stabilize herself as the cage swayed with the water's motion. The next few moments felt like an eternity. The orca swam closer, its massive head brushing against the cage. Sarah could see its intelligent eyes scanning her as if it were trying to understand what she was. She held her breath, staying as still as possible to avoid provoking it further. Above, the crew worked desperately to pull the cage out of the water. They threw ropes and used a winch to lift the structure, but the damage made it difficult to secure. The orca, seemingly agitated by the commotion, rammed the cage one final time. The impact caused part of the cage to break free, sending Sarah tumbling out. She clung to a piece of the wreckage, her heart pounding as she struggled to stay calm. The orca swam past her, its powerful tail creating a current that pushed her closer to the surface. Just as Sarah felt her strength fading, a crew member on the boat lowered a pole into the water. She grabbed onto it, using her last ounce of energy to hold tight as they pulled her to safety. When Sarah was finally on the deck, she collapsed, gasping for air. The crew wrapped her in a towel and checked her for injuries. Her head throbbed and her body was bruised, but she was alive. The Orca lingered near the boat for a few moments before disappearing into the depths. Its presence left a mark not just on Sarah, but on everyone who witnessed the encounter. For Sarah, the experience was life-changing. What started as a dream adventure turned into a fight for survival, a reminder of the raw power and unpredictability of the ocean. The cage dive that day would go down in history, not for the great whites it was meant to showcase, but for the unexpected and terrifying appearance of the ocean's ultimate apex predator. The morning of June 14, 2019, was shaping up to be perfect for Jason Riley. At 28 years old, Jason was a seasoned surfer who had spent over half his life chasing waves. He lived in Daytona Beach, Florida, and often sought out quieter, less crowded spots along the coast. That day, he chose a remote stretch of shoreline south of Ponce Inlet. It was a hidden gem, known only to locals who wanted to avoid the tourist-heavy beaches nearby. Jason parked his car just after sunrise, the horizon glowing with the promise of another warm summer day. He had been looking forward to this session all week. His job as a mechanic was demanding, but the ocean was his escape, a place where he could forget deadlines and oil stains and focus on the rhythm of the waves. The beach was almost empty when Jason arrived. A lone fisherman stood at the water's edge, casting his line, but there were no other surfers in sight. Jason grabbed his shortboard, checked the wax, and made his way down the sand. He felt the familiar excitement that always came with a morning surf. The water was calm, the waves were steady, and he had the whole place to himself. Florida's coastline is home to a diverse array of marine life. Dolphins often swim alongside surfers, and pelicans dive for fish just beyond the breakers. But these waters also host a variety of sharks. Bull sharks in particular are common in Florida and are known for their aggression. Unlike other species, bull sharks thrive in both saltwater and freshwater, often venturing into rivers and shallow coastal areas. Their adaptability, combined with their strong jaws and unpredictable behavior, makes them one of the most dangerous sharks to humans. Jason paddled out about 200 yards from shore where the waves began to break. The water was clear, giving him a good view of the seabed and the occasional school of fish passing below. For the first hour, everything was perfect. He caught a few solid waves, carving through the water with ease. Between sets, he sat on his board, letting the gentle motion of the ocean relax him. Then, as Jason turned to catch another wave, he noticed something unusual. A dark shape moved beneath him, slow and deliberate. At first, he thought it might be a dolphin, but the shape was too broad, the movement too different. His pulse quickened as the shadow came closer, revealing the unmistakable form of a bull shark. Jason froze, his instincts telling him to stay calm. He had encountered sharks before, but this one was larger, easily 8 feet long, and its behavior was unsettling. The shark circled him once, its dorsal fin breaking the surface, then disappeared into the depths. Jason tried to paddle back toward shore, his movements measured to avoid attracting attention. But before he could get far, the shark returned, this time with purpose. The first strike came without warning. The shark rammed the underside of Jason's board, knocking him into the water. He surfaced quickly, gasping for air and reaching for his board. The leash around his ankle kept it tethered to him, but the shark's sudden aggression sent a wave of panic through him. The water churned around him as the shark circled again. Jason managed to pull himself halfway onto his board, but the shark lunged before he could stabilize. This time, its jaws clamped down on his calf, the force of the bite sending shockwaves of pain through his leg. Bull sharks have one of the strongest bite forces of any shark, capable of crushing bone. Jason screamed as the teeth tore into his flesh. His instincts kicked in and he began punching the shark's snout with all his strength. He had read that the nose and gills were sensitive areas for sharks, and he focused his blows there. After several hits, the shark released him, but it didn't retreat. Jason's leg throbbed as blood poured from the wound, staining the water around him. He knew the blood could attract even more predators, and he had to get to safety fast. Using his arms and his uninjured leg, Jason paddled toward a sandbar about 50 yards away. Each stroke sent fresh waves of pain through his body, but he pushed through, his eyes darting between the sandbar and the shark, which continued to follow him. The distance to the sandbar felt endless. At one point, the shark bumped his board again, sending a jolt of terror through him. Jason swung his fists at the water, trying to keep it at bay. When he finally reached the sandbar, the water was shallow enough for him to crawl onto the soft, wet sand. He collapsed, his body trembling from exhaustion and pain. His calf was torn and bleeding heavily, and he felt lightheaded from blood loss. Jason waved frantically toward the shore, hoping someone would see him. A group of beachgoers, alerted by his movements and the commotion in the water, called 911. Rescue crews arrived within minutes, bringing a jet ski and a stretcher. 2 lifeguards carefully waded out to the sandbar, avoiding the shark, which lingered nearby. They secured Jason to the stretcher and loaded him onto the jet ski. As they raced back to shore, Jason's vision blurred. Paramedics were waiting on the beach, where they applied a tourniquet to stop the bleeding before rushing him to the hospital. The bull shark lingered in the area for a few moments before disappearing into the depths, its presence a haunting reminder of the ocean's unpredictability. Jason's encounter that day would leave him with scars, both physical and emotional, that he would carry for the rest of his life. It was May 14, 2021, and the waters off the coast of Belize were as inviting as ever. Belize, known for its barrier reef, hosts one of the most vibrant marine ecosystems in the world. Its warm, clear waters are home to countless species, from bright parrotfish to elusive sea turtles. Among these inhabitants are the Caribbean reef sharks, graceful predators that are usually harmless but undeniably commanding in presence. Divers often see them at a distance, gliding effortlessly through the water. That day, however, would prove to be anything but ordinary. Maria Alvarez, a 29-year-old marine biology enthusiast from Costa Rica, joined a small group of divers setting out from Ambergris Cay. She wasn't new to diving. Her experience spanned several years, but each trip still brought a mix of excitement and respect for the ocean's unpredictability. Alongside her were Liam Turner, a diving instructor with a reputation for calm under pressure, and Annika Singh, a software developer who had recently taken up diving as a hobby. Their guide for the day was Hector Villanueva, a local with over 2 decades of experience exploring Belize's waters. The group started early, boarding the small boat just as the sun began its slow climb. They headed for a popular dive spot called Shark Ray Alley, a place famous for its marine life. The plan was simple: spend a few hours in the water, marvel at the sights, and then return for lunch at a beachside cafe. None of them anticipated the chaos that lay ahead. By mid-morning, the group had suited up and plunged into the water. The first dive went smoothly. Schools of fish swirled around them, their scales flashing silver in the sunlight. Maria found herself mesmerized by the sight of stingrays gliding along the sandy bottom. Everything seemed peaceful. When the guide signaled it was time to move to a new spot, they climbed back onto the boat, chatting about the beauty they'd just witnessed. Their second dive site was about 15 minutes away, a less frequented location. Hector explained that it often attracted larger schools of fish and with them the occasional shark. Everyone nodded, intrigued but not alarmed. Sharks were part of the ocean's rhythm, after all. With the boat anchored and the briefing done, they entered the water again. At first, it was just as Hector described. The group descended slowly, their movements controlled and deliberate. Below them, a massive school of jackfish twisted and turned in unison, creating mesmerizing shapes. Maria couldn't help but grin behind her mask, her camera capturing every second. It felt like a perfect dive. Then, out of the corner of her eye, Maria saw a shape. It was unmistakable. A Caribbean reef shark, its sleek body cutting through the water. She gestured to the others, who acknowledged it with nods. Sighting this one Caribbean reef shark wasn't unusual. It stayed at a distance, uninterested in the divers. Moments later, another appeared, then another. The Caribbean reef sharks moved closer, their movements deliberate but not aggressive. Yet something felt off. The fish that had been so abundant minutes earlier began to scatter, leaving the water eerily empty except for the circling sharks. Maria's breathing quickened, the sound of air rushing through her regulator loud in her ears. She glanced at Hector, who signaled for everyone to stay calm and maintain their positions. The group tightened their formation, instinctively drawing closer together. Maria could feel her heart pounding. She reminded herself of the rules: don't make sudden movements, don't provoke them, and stay aware. But the sharks kept coming. There were at least 7 now, their bodies circling like shadows. One Caribbean reef shark, larger than the rest, broke from the group. It swam directly at Maria, nudging her shoulder with enough force to throw her off balance. The sudden motion dislodged her regulator, and panic surged through her as she scrambled to recover it. Her hands fumbled for a moment that felt far too long before she managed to secure it again. Inhaling deeply, the disruption seemed to agitate the sharks. Their movements became faster and less predictable. Maria tried to focus, checking her air supply and scanning for Hector's signal. The surface felt impossibly far away, and she knew surfacing too quickly wasn't an option. She activated her buoyancy control device, beginning a slow, careful ascent. The sharks followed. Every second felt like an eternity. Maria moved deliberately, her eyes darting between the circling predators and the group below. She saw Liam and Annika doing the same, their faces tense behind their masks. Hector remained below them, acting as a buffer between the group and the sharks. His calm presence was the only thing keeping panic at bay. One shark swam close again, this time brushing against Maria's leg. She felt a sharp sting and realized it had grazed her with its teeth. The pain was mild, but the sight of blood in the water sent a chill through her. She knew sharks could detect even the smallest trace of blood from miles away. Would this make them more aggressive? She pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the slow, steady ascent. The boat was visible now, a small dot above them. It felt impossibly far. Maria's muscles ached, her movements growing slower as exhaustion set in. The sharks continued their relentless circling, their presence a constant reminder of how vulnerable they were. She could hear her breathing, rapid and uneven, but she forced herself to stay calm. Panic would only make things worse. At one point, the large shark returned, this time nudging her harder. The force spun her sideways, and her mask flooded with water. Blinded and disoriented, she struggled to clear it, her chest tightening with fear. Somehow, she managed to fix it, but the encounter left her shaken. She glanced at Hector, who signaled for her to keep ascending. His movements were calm, but his eyes betrayed his concern. The final stretch to the surface felt endless. The boat's outline grew clearer, and Maria clung to the hope that safety was just a few feet away. The sharks were still there, but their numbers seemed to have thinned. Maybe they had lost interest, or maybe they were waiting. Maria didn't want to find out. When she finally reached the boat, she grabbed onto the ladder with trembling hands. The crew above pulled her up quickly, their faces pale with worry. As she collapsed onto the deck, she looked back at the water. The sharks were still there, their fins slicing through the surface. Below, the rest of the group was ascending, Hector ensuring everyone stayed together. One by one, they made it back to the boat. Liam was the last to climb aboard, his face pale but determined. As soon as he was safely on deck, Hector signaled for the captain to start the engine. The boat lurched forward, leaving the sharks behind. Maria sat in silence, her hands still shaking. Her wetsuit bore small tears where the shark had grazed her leg, and blood oozed from the shallow wound. The crew cleaned it quickly, assuring her it was minor, but the memory of those circling shapes stayed with her, vivid and unrelenting. That day changed Maria. It wasn't just the fear or the close call. It was the realization of how powerful and unpredictable the ocean could be. The sharks hadn't attacked out of malice. They were simply acting on instinct. Maria couldn't bring herself to hate them. Instead, she felt a strange sense of respect for the ocean, for its creatures, and the fragility of life in their world. As the boat sped toward the shore, the group sat quietly, each lost in their thoughts. The clear waters of Belize still sparkled in the distance, hiding their secrets just beneath the surface. It was a beautiful, dangerous place, and Maria knew she would never see it the same way again. It was October 3, 2017, when Matt Carter, a 32-year-old snorkeling enthusiast, joined a small group of adventurers exploring the Great Barrier Reef in Queensland, Australia. The day started with clear skies and calm waters, perfect conditions for snorkeling. The group, led by a local guide named Charlie Hayes, departed early from Cairns to reach an area near Flynn Reef, known for its stunning coral formations and diverse marine life. The Great Barrier Reef is the world's largest coral reef system, stretching over 1,400 miles. Its waters are home to hundreds of species of fish, sea turtles, and sharks, including gray nurse sharks. These sharks, often called gentle giants, are typically slow-moving and non-aggressive toward humans, feeding on small fish and crustaceans. Still, their size and sharp teeth command respect. Matt, an experienced diver and snorkeler from New Zealand, had been looking forward to this trip for months. His friends often teased him about his obsession with marine life, but he loved the underwater world. This trip felt like an escape from his busy work life, and he couldn't wait to explore the hidden corners of the reef. By mid-morning, the group reached the first dive spot. Everyone eagerly put on their snorkeling gear and slipped into the water. The reef below was vibrant with life. Brightly colored fish darted between coral structures, and green sea turtles floated lazily nearby. Matt felt a familiar sense of peace as he swam along the reef's edge, observing the intricate ecosystem. The group stayed together for the first half hour, guided by Charlie, who pointed out interesting features and marine animals. But as the group moved toward a shallower section, Matt's attention was drawn to a deeper, secluded coral outcrop about 50 meters away. It looked like the perfect place to see something unique. He hesitated for a moment, knowing it was safer to stay close to the group. but his curiosity got the better of him. Matt took a deep breath, adjusted his snorkel, and swam toward the outcrop. The water grew cooler as he moved away from the others. The coral was even more stunning up close, its surface alive with small darting fish and colorful anemones. He felt a small thrill of discovery and continued exploring, unaware of how far he had drifted. A shadow passed above him. Matt looked up and froze. A large gray nurse shark was gliding silently through the water. It moved with an elegance that made it seem almost harmless. Matt's heart raced, but he reminded himself that gray nurse sharks rarely attack humans. It swam past him without showing any interest, disappearing into the blue. He felt his body relax, though his senses remained heightened. He decided it was time to head back to the group. As he turned, movement caught his eye. The shark had returned, circling closer now. It wasn't acting aggressively, but its proximity was unsettling. Matt tried to remain calm, keeping his movement slow and deliberate. Without warning, the shark darted forward. Its powerful jaws closed around Matt's leg, the force jolting him backward. Pain shot through his body as the shark's teeth sank into his flesh. Instinct kicked in. He thrashed and kicked furiously, trying to free himself, but the shark's grip was unyielding. Its weight dragged him downward, away from the light above. The world around him blurred. Matt's chest burned as he fought to hold his breath. He struck at the shark's head with his fists, aiming for its sensitive eyes and gills. Each strike seemed to loosen its grip slightly, but the pain was overwhelming. Blood clouded the water, making it harder to see. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the shark let go. Matt didn't wait to see if it would return. He kicked upward with all the strength he could muster, ignoring the searing pain in his leg. His mind screamed for air as his lungs ached. He reached the surface and gasped, his breaths ragged and desperate. The group was still some distance away, but they had noticed the commotion. Charlie and another snorkeler were already swimming toward him. Matt forced himself to keep moving, each stroke sending a fresh wave of pain through his body. His vision blurred, and he felt lightheaded, but the thought of the shark kept him going. Charlie reached him first, grabbing his arm and helping him stay afloat. The second snorkeler, a young woman named Ellie, helped steady him as they swam back to the boat. By the time they reached it, Matt's strength was nearly gone. The crew hoisted him aboard, their faces pale as they saw the deep gashes on his leg. Blood pooled on the deck as they worked quickly to apply pressure and stop the bleeding. The boat's engine roared to life as they sped toward the nearest hospital, a 2-hour journey back to the mainland. Matt drifted in and out of consciousness during the ride, his thoughts a chaotic mix of fear and disbelief. He couldn't shake the image of the shark's eyes, cold and unyielding, or the feeling of being pulled downward into the depths. When they finally reached the shore, an ambulance was waiting. Paramedics rushed to stabilize Matt and transport him to the hospital, where doctors began the painstaking work of cleaning and stitching the wounds. His leg was severely injured but intact. He had escaped with his life, but the encounter had left its mark, not just on his body, but on his spirit. The Great Barrier Reef remained as beautiful and mysterious as ever, but Matt knew he would never see it the same way again. The kayaks glided smoothly through the still water, paddles cutting cleanly with each stroke. Emily Carter and Kate Reynolds had been out for about an hour, their conversation punctuated by the occasional splash of jumping fish. The salty air mixed with the earthy scent of the marsh grasses surrounding the inlet, a hallmark of the South Carolina coast. It was July 18, 2020, a day they had planned for weeks. A chance to unwind and explore a stretch of water near Beaufort that Emily had read about online. Kate trailed behind Emily, admiring her friend's confidence. Emily had always loved the water, treating every trip like an adventure. Kate, though less enthusiastic about open waters, trusted Emily to lead the way. They had started early, leaving the marina just after sunrise to avoid the afternoon heat. The inlet seemed alive, with crabs scuttling along the edges and birds swooping low over the surface. As they paddled deeper into the inlet, they passed small sandbars and clumps of oyster shells, steering clear of the shallow areas. Emily, as usual, pushed ahead, eager to explore further. Kate, more cautious, lagged a few feet behind, keeping an eye on the horizon. The water deepened as they moved toward the open sea, the current growing stronger. Without warning, Emily's kayak jolted violently to the side. At first, Kate thought she had hit a submerged log or some debris, but then Emily screamed, a sound that cut through the peaceful morning and sent a chill down Kate's spine. Before Kate could process what was happening, Emily was yanked out of her kayak, disappearing into the water. Kate froze, her paddle slipping from her hands. The bright yellow kayak rocked wildly as Emily struggled to surface. When she did, Kate saw the terror in her eyes and the water around her turning red. A bull shark, its dorsal fin cutting through the water, was circling Emily. The splashing and commotion had likely drawn it close, and now it had Emily's leg in its grip. Kate's mind raced as adrenaline took over. She grabbed the rope from her kayak's storage compartment and threw it toward Emily. The rope splashed just out of reach, and Kate frantically reeled it back in for another try. Emily was fighting hard, kicking with her free leg and using her arms to keep above water. The shark pulled her under again, and for a moment Kate lost sight of her. When Emily surfaced again, she grabbed the rope with one hand, her other arm flailing to keep her balance. Kate pulled with all her strength, her muscles burning as she dragged Emily closer. The shark, undeterred, lunged again, its powerful tail thrashing as it hit Emily's kayak and nearly overturned it. Kate screamed in frustration and used her paddle to strike the water, hoping to scare the predator away. The paddle connected with the shark's head as it surfaced briefly, causing it to veer off momentarily. Kate seized the chance to pull Emily closer, her arms shaking from the effort. The shark returned, bumping the side of Kate's kayak, its massive body tilting the small vessel dangerously. Kate struck at it again, her hands gripping the paddle so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Emily, her leg bleeding heavily, finally reached the side of Kate's kayak. With a strength she didn't know she had, Kate hauled her friend up, ignoring the pain in her back and shoulders. Emily collapsed into the kayak, her face pale, and her breaths coming in sharp gasps. The shark continued to circle, its dorsal fin slicing the water ominously. Kate knew they couldn't stay there. The shark was relentless, and Emily's injury was severe. The marina was still some distance away, but it was their only hope. Kate secured Emily as best as she could, using one arm to hold her steady and the other to paddle. Every stroke felt like a battle against the current, and the fear pressing down on her. The shark didn't retreat. It bumped the kayak again, hard enough to throw Kate off balance. She screamed, swinging the paddle wildly in its direction. The blows seemed to deter it just enough to give her a moment to adjust. Emily groaned in pain, her leg now a deep red mess, but she clung to the kayak, her eyes barely open. Kate paddled with everything she had, her arms and shoulders screaming in protest. The marina's docks came into view, but they seemed impossibly far. The shark followed, its persistence terrifying. Kate swung the paddle whenever it came too close, keeping it at bay while inching closer to safety. As they neared the marina, shouts came from the dock. Boaters who had noticed the commotion sprang into action, one launching a small motorboat to meet them. Kate felt a wave of relief as the motorboat reached them, and the crew helped pull Emily aboard. The shark lingered, circling one last time before disappearing into the depths. Kate climbed into the motorboat, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. Emily lay on the deck, her leg wrapped hastily with a towel to slow the bleeding. The boater sped toward the dock, where more people waited to help. Kate didn't let go of Emily's hand even as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. She had done everything she could to save her friend, but the fear and adrenaline still coursed through her, refusing to let her rest. It was June 23, 2018, a bright summer day on Wiley Beach, Maui. A group of 6 tourists gathered by the shore listening to their guide, Jason Nakamura, as he explained the basics of paddleboarding. The warm air buzzed with energy as vacationers splashed in the water and lounged on the sand. Jason, a 29-year-old born and raised in Maui, had been leading paddleboarding tours for years. He knew these waters well and loved showing tourists the beauty of the Pacific Ocean. The group included Tom Harris, a 34-year-old software engineer from Colorado, on his first trip to Hawaii. Tom had been looking forward to trying paddleboarding, something he'd never done before. He was joined by others, an older couple, Linda and Charles Grant, 2 college students named Rachel and Nick, and a solo traveler, Paula West. They were all excited to get started, eager to leave the shore behind and venture into the deeper water. After a short briefing, they launched their boards, paddling cautiously at first. The water was calm, perfect for beginners, and Jason led them in a straight line toward a nearby reef. Below, the coral stretched like a patchwork quilt, alive with darting fish and waving sea plants. Tom felt nervous as he tried to balance on his board, but managed to stay upright after a few shaky moments. The others laughed as they wobbled, but soon got the hang of it. As they paddled further from shore, Jason pointed out the sights. He explained how the reef was a feeding ground for green sea turtles and why tiger sharks, common in these waters, sometimes visited the area. Tiger sharks are apex predators, large and powerful. They can grow up to 14 feet long and are known for their broad diets, which include fish, sea turtles, and even seabirds. While attacks on humans are rare, Jason always cautioned his groups to stay calm if they ever spotted one. The group reached the edge of the reef, where the water deepened and turned a darker shade of blue. Jason encouraged everyone to pause and look down. Beneath their boards, the ocean floor seemed endless, a void stretching far below. Tom leaned forward cautiously, peering into the water. He spotted a turtle gliding gracefully near the coral, and a school of silvery fish shimmered as they darted by. Suddenly, the calm was shattered. Without warning, a massive tiger shark surfaced near the group. Its dark shape emerged from the depths, gliding silently just beneath the boards. Jason's experience kicked in immediately. He shouted for everyone to stay still, his voice firm and clear. The tourists froze, gripping their paddles tightly, their faces a mix of fear and disbelief. The shark circled slowly at first, its movements deliberate. It was large, likely over 10 feet long, and its striped body was unmistakable. Jason kept his eyes on it, hoping it would lose interest and swim away. But the shark didn't leave. Instead, it moved closer, its curiosity turning to something more aggressive. The shark lunged upward, striking the side of Tom's paddleboard. The impact was strong enough to knock Tom off balance, and he fell into the water with a loud splash. Panic surged through the group as they watched, frozen. Tom resurfaced, gasping, but before he could climb back onto his board, the shark struck again, this time grabbing his arm. Tom's scream pierced the air. The shark's powerful jaws clamped down, dragging him beneath the surface for a terrifying moment. He kicked furiously, trying to free himself, his movements frantic. Blood spread through the water, bright and alarming. Jason acted without hesitation, paddling toward Tom as fast as he could. Jason reached Tom just as the shark let go, its jaws releasing their grip. Tom struggled to stay afloat, his arm bleeding heavily. Jason shouted for the rest of the group to paddle back toward shore immediately. The tourists, shaken but unhurt, turned their boards and began moving quickly, their strokes uneven but desperate. The shark wasn't finished. It circled again, its dorsal fin cutting through the water. Jason positioned himself between Tom and the predator, using his paddle to strike the water forcefully. The shark lunged at Jason's board, bumping it hard enough to make him wobble. Jason held his ground, jabbing at the shark with his paddle to keep it at bay. Tom, weak from blood loss and shock, clung to Jason's board. Jason grabbed him by his good arm and heaved him partially onto the board, straining under the effort. The shark made another pass, its massive body brushing against the board. Jason struck it again, aiming for its sensitive snout. The blow seemed to deter it, and the shark retreated momentarily. Jason paddled hard, pulling Tom with him as they moved toward shore. Tom's head lolled, his face pale and his breath shallow. Jason kept talking to him, urging him to hold on. Every stroke felt like a battle, his muscles burning with the effort. The rest of the group had reached the shallows, shouting for help as they stumbled onto the sand. Beachgoers and lifeguards rushed into action. A lifeguard grabbed a rescue board and paddled out to meet Jason and Tom. Together they secured Tom and brought him to shore. Jason collapsed onto the sand, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. His arms ached, and his mind raced with the events of the last few minutes. Tom lay on the beach, surrounded by people trying to stop the bleeding. His arm was badly torn, but he was alive. Jason sat nearby, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the shark had disappeared, the ocean once again calm and unassuming.